Hello.
Hi there. Hi,
Hi,
Henrik.
Andy. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm great.
Great. Thank you for sitting down with us today for our first episode of Behind the Future, powered by Ardoq. Are you
That's my
excited?
pleasure. Yeah, it's good. It's my pleasure.
Yeah. What kind of expectations do you have for our call today?
We're just gonna have a chat, aren't we? That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, definitely. So I really look forward to learning more about kind of your experience within IT as well, and then of course touch upon ethical consulting, CoStratify, and also linking the kind of linking business and IT together, and hear about your kind of experiences within IT as well. So I think maybe as a starting point, I'm just going to introduce the concept of behind the future and myself, of course. So I'm just going to get a confirmation from our side here that we are ready to proceed. We're up and running. Yes, we are up and running. So, hello everyone. Thank you for watching, and thank you for joining this first LinkedIn Live episode of Behind the Future with Ardoq. Today, I'm sitting down with Andy Yates, director and co-owner of CoStratify, the consultancy. So, I'm just going to quickly touch a little bit on the background for why we wanted to start this initiative. So, my name is Henrik Holth. I work as an account executive at Ardoq. And for the last couple of years, I've been fortunate to meet a lot of great and interesting people, smart, intelligent people, to kind of learn more about how they're managing and navigating change within their own organizations. And if we look at the kind of some of the research and we look at the facts around this as well, companies, organizations, they're pouring millions into the concepts of digital transformation, but we still see that most digital transformation projects they fail, and there might be several reasons for that. But even though we're becoming more and more connected and it's more and more about the data, we still realize that a platform can only get you so far, but it's also about the people that is going to be a part of that change journey as well. So, with that in mind, we wanted to start a concept to learn more about the people behind IT, their experiences, their best practices, and what other people can learn to better navigate change in their own organizations. So, therefore, I'm very happy and very excited to be joined by you today, Andy. And maybe we can just start with a quick introduction of yourself. Who is Andy Yates?
Okay, Andy Yates. Okay, I'll keep it simple and easy. So I'm a co-owner and director of CoStratify. We set up a company 2 years ago, but I've been kind of running my own companies now for 6 years. And my background, I started in IT. I'd probably say I'm going to show my age now, in the 1980s. And in the 1980s, it was very, very different. But what I realized really early on about what made me tick and what got me excited about technology, is that the value you get from using technology to get an outcome. So I started my life in building aircraft. That's where I started. I wasn't in the traditional IT. And through my career, I kind of have switched into different sectors across oil and gas and automotive and planes and trains and all that kind of world, and ended up in places like public sector, the National Health Service, and local councils, housing associations. But what I've realized all the way through that, and what makes me passionate about that, is when you see technology adding value, and when it generates value that creates a better outcome, whether that's a better outcome for the patient, the tenant, the driver of a car, somebody who's on a plane. And my first experience in kind of IT was using technology to make components for manufacturing. And
Mm.
that kind of simulation and design side of it. So I think that's probably where my kind of background and passions come from. So that's a bit
Mhm.
about me. Um,
Yep. And when you started that kind of on your journey within IT and aircraft, in I'm not going to say your age, of course, in the 1980s, but what kind of objectives and ambitions did you have for your career when you were starting out?
I think what I did was when I started was I started to realize that um, I wanted to make a difference, and by making a difference was in the outcomes of what I created, whether that was a great design or whether it was um, implementing some technology that made somebody's life better. I'll be honest, when I started out, it's like somebody might say to me, "Oh, well, how did you define your career and what did you do?" And and I took every opportunity as it came along. And what I would always say to everybody who has an opportunity is take that opportunity. You will always get something out of it. Now, it might not be what you expected, but you'll get something out of it. There's always an experience, and that's what I found along the way. And probably my biggest thing I would say is I've not been too prescriptive about what I do or where I go, and look at it on every case, the value you get from it, really.
Mhm. And yeah, definitely kind of grabbing the change, grabbing the chance that you have in front of you as well, and try to make the most out of it. And I'm also guessing that for my generation as well, that was born in the 90s, kind of we're going to have a structured plan for our careers. We need to know what we're going to do at every single step of the way. But I think is what is really interesting to learn from people that have been in those tracks before us as well is also to learn a little bit about kind of what has been some of your biggest learnings throughout your career, and kind of what is, or I can kind of change the question a little bit. What made you kind of found CoStratify? What was the reason for the need
Okay,
that you saw in the market?
so when I started and I set up my first company, which kind of then morphed into CoStratify 2 years ago. One of the things that I used to get frustrated, I was in a kind of a chief technology type role, and one of the frustrations I had was that people would come to me with great ideas, and they would say, "Oh, I've got a fantastic idea. It's going to say make a better user experience. It's going to be cheaper. It's going to be faster. It's going to be better." And one of the things I would say is, "That's brilliant. Okay, so tell me about what happens now." And one of the things that they would say was, "Well, it's not as good." And I go, "No, no, tell me about the experience you get now. So what's the experience? And do people like that? Do they value it? Do they get a good quality experience from what you're selling or what you're doing or what you're delivering, whether that's to an end user or to a patient, a customer, or whatever?" And there would be a kind of a bit of uncertainty, and people would look at me and kind of go, "Well, I'm not sure." So that was one of the learning I found, was that if you are going to, and you touched on it at the start about why sometimes digital transformation programs fail. One of the things I learned very early on, and it got reinforced as I was in these kind of roles, is that understand who your users are going to be, understand what their experience is. I encourage everybody to get out there and experience on the front line what is happening. So when you roll out a new system, um, go and shadow the person who's using that and look at their inefficiencies, or look at how they're managing to have problems. So I would say that's one of my learning points. The second learning point I would say is that when you do that, and then the next follow-on question would have been, well, okay, so we're gonna save money, or it's going to be a better experience. Well, what does it cost today? And people just can't really articulate. They will come back to how much they paid for something. So in other words, I bought this for £5,000. The software cost this, and I pay this amount of maintenance per year. But what they don't really take into account for that is all the things that are wrapped around that, like the people, the support calls, the infrastructure, all the things that are the total cost. So when I kind of set up CoStratify, it was all about um, it was really which is what our catchphrase is as a company, which is kind of forming strong evidence for change. So everything we do is about evidence. It's all about finding the evidence to support a change. So we will never ever have a conversation with a client that we can't back up and link back to the evidence that we found from their own staff who are saying how something's not working. And there's so much complexity in IT, and one of the things we try to do is unlock that puzzle, that complexity, to demystify that kind of black box. And there's so many people out there, especially people in the finance world, who kind of don't understand the full costs associated with IT, and it's just this black box of things that seem quite expensive to them because they're just seeing it as line items of budget. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so because that's the same for us as well. Like when we work with clients, what we typically see is that we need to kind of take that shift from just looking at it as a cost center, IT as a cost center, towards a more how can we get more kind of our capabilities realized, our key strategic initiatives
Yeah.
realized, and understand, what are the key objectives that we're actually trying to solve. But why do you think it has been so difficult, historical, for kind of companies to bridge that gap between business and IT, just from your own career as a CTO and kind of being in chief technology roles as well?
I think I don't necessarily think there's enough emphasis built on between the bridging between IT and the business. So we quite often see when we go in to do a kind of a readiness review in a client, we'll look at it and we'll talk to a client and they'll say, yeah, but the IT team don't understand my problem. And then so the business is saying that, and then the IT team clearly don't understand the business don't understand IT, and finance don't understand what both of them are doing, but it's just a big cost. So what we try to do in a way is it's communication. So the biggest barrier is that people don't understand or take the time to understand the real problems that people have got on the ground. So finding that evidence can be quite easy because what we do is we go and talk to people. We talk to those end users and we ask them, "Oh, what's the experience like? How good is it? When things go wrong, how's that experience for you? When you ask for something new or you ask for some change, how is that received?" And I think that really is the way we find the evidence. And then by looking at how you then look at the cost, and then you apply the cost and the evidence together along with the discovery of all the IT information, that's when you kind of start to build this picture, what we call the as is, the current state picture. And that what we try to do is, quite a few clients will say to us, "Oh, well, yeah, we knew all that." Now what they really mean by that is they knew it, but we hadn't assembled it into the right set of evidence. So we're a bit like forensic analysts. We kind of go in there and find the crime scene elements and put them all together, and then go, "Do you know this is all happening? And do you know that? And these people are not happy about that. And you spent this amount of money, but the reality is the value the business think they're getting is quite low. It's quite small." So
Yeah.
that is really where we try and do is we try and bridge that gap, and that's why we use Ardoq. We use Ardoq in a way. We don't sell Ardoq. We're a completely independent organization, but we use Ardoq and promote the method of. We don't call it enterprise architecture. What we call it is technology to business linkage. And what we do is we allow organizations. We take create a view of the organization, so all the structure, the roles, and then we then get the applications, and then we look at who in those roles uses those applications, and then we align the infrastructure to those applications. So it means that we can come from either end and look at how the value and the cost and the benefits are flowing around the organization between that bridging that IT and business link.
Mhm. Of course, we're going to touch upon that as well. You mentioned kind of you're also vendor agnostic, and that brings us to the point of ethical consulting, which we're going to talk about. But I think for us is also like, regardless of, just as you mentioned, regardless of the tool that you're using or enterprise architecture as a concept, that is just a toolkit to help you drive digital transformation. And what we often realize and see that the enterprise architecture itself becomes a means to an end, while kind of enterprise architecture is there to realize and to help the organization successfully transform.
Yeah.
And then you kind of mentioned engagement there as well, and kind of communication. How do you go about making sure that different domains, both business and IT, can work together? So where do you start? How has that been for you
Okay.
guys when you typically work with clients?
So I go back to my very very first experiences, some enterprise architecture experiences, and if I look back to them, it was a bit like you're painting a large building and you start painting it, and by the time you get back to the end of the building, you have to start painting again. And the problem is with enterprise architecture methods that use that kind of techniques, or you're wedded to a method or a framework. What happens is it becomes very, very inward facing technical. So again, it's all about the communication. When we talk to execs about technology to business linkage, which is essentially enterprise architecture, we never use the words enterprise
Mhm.
architecture. We use it in a language where we talk about things like um, the business is made up of these business units. These business units are comprised of of these departments. These departments use these applications. These applications run on this infrastructure. This infrastructure lives in this location. And what we tried to do is make it in a sentence that you could equally talk to somebody about. And at no point in any of that did I get down into Windows Server operating systems and TOGAF frameworks, because it's really important that it's a language, and it's a language about business to technology and technology to business. And I think that's part of the way why we've been successful, is because we've seen that language, and we just break those barriers down. And there's far too many people look at architecture and think, oh, that's techie, but it doesn't have to be. This is about a picture, and we're really into pictures. We love all our outputs, and all our deliverables are very pictures. We don't write Word documents. We do PowerPoint as in our deliverables, and we do lots of pictures to make the classic picture tells 1,000 words.
Yeah, definitely. And also, like, we're visual beings as well, so kind of having it visualized is going to make it much
Yeah,
easier to understand for non-technical stakeholders as well. And kind of as every organization becomes more and more kind of driven by technology, basically every company and organization in 2021 is a technology company in one way or another. And to be able to address those concerns, I definitely think you need to simplify a lot in the way that you communicate with business and IT as well. So, what I want to kind of touch upon now, Andy, is basically go a little bit closer into what is the concept of ethical consulting, because
okay.
we're working with partners all over the world, and what we're also seeing is kind of creating evidence or strong evidence for change is one thing, but also then transparently communicating with the clients as well about what are the true needs and what are the challenges they actually need to
Yeah.
realize. So could you shed a light on that?
Yeah. So when we set up ethical consulting, when we set up CoStratify, really in our mind was about this whole concept of ethical consulting. We didn't. It wasn't called that then, but we since then have coined that phrase. And we think what we try to say to clients is that um, you can either be an independent consultant and give an independent view and an opinion, or you can sell products. Now, some people will argue with that. I expect there might be chat and messages coming through around that, but people that what our view is, you can't be both, because if you're both, you have a vested interest in the answer. And we've been into clients where a client has said to us, we're thinking of doing this kind of system, and what do you think? And we've given them a really honest opinion, and we said, look, that's just not our view, our opinion, take it or leave it, is that that is not the right solution for you. Now, if you can imagine, I'd been selling that solution as well, there would be a vested interest and maybe even a pressure on me to try and make that solution work. So what we've said is it's all about ethics, and not having a hidden agenda. And so much so, we are in the position where we do not take any commission. Like, for example, with Ardoq, we use Ardoq. If people say to us, oh, that's a nice tool, we like it, we say, look, go and talk to Ardoq. We don't sell it. Please do talk to them, and they'll have a conversation with you. We'll explain what we've used it for and how we've used it. But what we won't do is we would never ever take a commission or a payment or a referral fee. In fact, what we're starting to talk to clients about is how, and we'll launch a bit more of this later this year, of how, if there had have been a referral fee paid, that referral fee is paid to a charity of the client's choice, or one of our charities, or to maybe a community fund in a housing association, that helps benefit others. Because what we're saying is independence is independent. You can't be independent and then have a vested interest in something. And there are, unfortunately, there are many people who are out there, and we are disrupting a little bit here. And I'm not criticizing anybody's business model. It's just we don't believe in that model. And what we're trying to say is, be very careful when you pick somebody who's an independent consultant to make sure they are truly independent. And that's where we come from ethical consulting. And that's why we're coining this phrase, is we'd love to get a movement in terms of that, which is all about the ethics of consulting. Consulting does get a bad press at times, and what our whole model is to be there, support the client, advise and give them a journey to go on, enable their transformation, But at the end of that, we should be able to walk away, and we should have skilled their people up. We're not a land and expand type consulting organization. If in 12 months we're still there, I'll be asking questions, because we will be still advising, but we should have, and we've got great experiences of that, of doing that in a number of clients.
So, kind of two things. The first thing is, as well, is in my processes as well. When I run that with different types of clients, I also am very explicit in the way that we communicate that Ardoq is not right for everyone, and it also should be to have that transparent dialogue. I also think you will get and deliver the most value, as even if it's a vendor, if it's a consultant in itself, if you're much more transparent in the way that you're communicating. So I'm right there with you, and I think this is something we've been investing heavily in as well, to make our processes much more transparent in the way that we communicate. But then point number two is, of course, you mentioned like you're disrupting the way that consultants do their work. How do you think we can? How do you think the kind of consultancy industry will look a couple of years from now? Just on that point, as you're already trying to disrupt a little bit of how it's done.
I think it has to. Consultancy has been around a long time in a lot of different shapes and a lot of different sizes, and consultancies have merged and changed. But I think, because of the need, in a post-COVID world, hopefully, we haven't visited a client site now for, probably 15, 16 months. We do all our work remotely, and we use specialists, and bring those specialists in either as associates to work with us. And the boundaries of where, previously somebody would say a consultant had to be based in London or had to be based in Paris, for example, those boundaries have gone. So I think the industry has proven that it can work remotely. It has proven that it can still add value, and using technology. So a great technology we use, I should be selling this, but we don't sell products, is Miro. So we use
Yeah,
Miro, which is a virtual whiteboarding technology, and that's brilliant for us to share with clients, and they can put their comments up there. And as a concept, it's amazing. If you've not used it, Miro is a really good. It is like a bit like the Microsoft whiteboarding, but it's all the whiteboards and all the post-its you would ever dream of in a digital world. and
yeah,
and, it, and we use a lot of, and it was a client that actually introduced it to me, and
yeah,
they're using it really well, and there's lots of templates with it. So what I would say is, I think the industry will change. I think, customers are getting more and more, clients are getting more and more savvy about value from that consultancy, and they want outcomes and actions. So they
yeah,
don't want this kind of model that says, "Oh, here's a report, and then you pay me a bit more money and pay the next report, and then give me another bit." That they want, actually, I want to know where I'm going to be, where I'm going to go, what can I do, and actually, what do I have to do internally to change? And I think a lot of that, the consultancy will be very specialist consultancy for specific clients. And one of the big challenges is that a lot of organizations, will always come and say, "Oh, well, somebody else has done their method, so we need to start again from scratch." Actually, that is something we absolutely disagree with. If you've already, if you've got a baseline for change, which is what we're all about, is baselining, forming that baseline for change. We build from that. So it's not about throwing what's gone on before as well, throwing away what's gone. We add to it and add more value to it.
yeah. So the first thing I just want to say there for people that heard Andy say it. So it was Miro, right?
Miro,
Miro.
Miro. Yeah, it's, a really, really good, virtualizer. We've been using it now for 18 months, and we do a lot of work with it. Yeah,
Cool. Yeah, and
Miro.com.
the second thing as well, like creating evidence for change, and also making sure that you don't reinvent the wheel every single time you're on the client project, but
Yeah.
making sure that you have it as a in a structured format. So, cognizant that we're coming up to the end of our time today, Andy. But what I want to ask is basically, do you have any kind of resources or books or
Okay.
whatever that you have read or have kind of used throughout your career that has been valuable for people
Okay.
to have as key takeaways from this?
So there's a couple that spring to mind, in recent years. So the first one is, I'll just have to get the title right. So it's, I'm really into, understanding how people make decisions, and so. I don't tend to read a lot of IT documents because I get that in day to day through websites, blogs, and all that kind of stuff. And I'll go on an online tutorial, an online video. So, but what I wanted to just touch on is things like there's a book that I'm halfway through. It's called The Psychology of Persuasion by
Mhm.
Rupert B. Cialdini, and this
Mhm.
is all about how over the years people have managed to get people to say yes. And it's a really interesting book, and it goes all the way through different persuasive techniques and techniques that actually are quite invisible to you, but people use them all the time. So that's a really interesting one. I'd say another one to look at, and it's something we really base a lot of our work on, is um, technology business management. So TBM has been around a long time, but it's all about running IT as a business. So if want to look it up, Google TBM, and that will give you a little bit more information. And that's what we build the principles of our company on, which is all about building, aligning technology to business, and also the fact that understanding costs and understanding how those costs are apportioned. And that's what we're doing. We're in the process of beta testing our we're doing a lot of this with spreadsheets, but we're doing a lot of this with now with an application that we've developed and are launching, and that is all about embracing some of those concepts around cost and analysis. So I think they're my kind of top ones. What really inspires me, just as a kind of a wrap up, is I like people who take things and do things differently. So if you look at people like Dyson, he reinvented the whole concept of the vacuum cleaner from the early days of Hoover, and look at what he's doing now. He's from hair straighteners to hair dryers to hand blower. He's taken that concept of very simply blowing air and sucking air
Yeah.
and do things differently with it. And things like Branson and people like that, and the way they change the way it disrupt the market, the whole also the EasyJets of this world and the Ryanairs, they're disruptors, and that I think every so often a disruptor will come along and it'll change the shape of where things go.
Yep. And also just the book that you mentioned there as well, like Psychology of Persuasion. I think that that is something that is extremely relevant to every stakeholder that is going to communicate and finding evidence for change in their organizations, right?
Yeah,
So being able to kind of communicate to, for example, C-level stakeholders, and how do you get people to buy into your vision as well? Because I'm guessing when you're interacting with a lot of C-level and the different stakeholders across the organization, the ability to persuade and actually finding those evidence, I think that that is also a good book for everyone to read
yeah.
to find out how they can communicate.
I think it goes back to the very early days of the work I did. I used to work in IBM, and they had a method, and people will know about it from years ago. Is that whole elevator pitch where you need to get your message across between one floor and the next floor, and many organisations have followed that kind of approach, and it is
Mhm.
very much being concise. It's about getting that message across to the right. Understand what the key drivers are and the key outcomes, and everything we do when we present back our findings, we always link it back to what the organization is trying to achieve as an outcome. And I think if you can get that message across very succinctly and very clearly, you will not go far wrong. Clearly, the message has got to be good. It's got to be a good quality message, but it's all about and I'm not talking about just selling. I'm talking about communicating, and it comes back. And I think that's a theme that seems to have come out today. I probably didn't intend that to come out, but it seems to come out. Is we are just a company that allows organizations to communicate better and
Mhm.
understand what they've got, and that's what we do. And there are others out there that do that, but yeah, we people seem to like the style that we take. So
Yeah.
yeah, have a look at us on www.costratify.com. So
Yeah. I think those are beautiful final words from our first Behind the Future episode. Thank you so much for joining, Andy. I hope it was valuable for you as well.
no, it's excellent. Really enjoyed it.
Great. So, thank you for joining, everyone. We will, of course, be running these sessions on a monthly basis going forward. So, in the next couple of days, we're also going to announce the next kind of lines of speakers going forward. So hopefully this has been valuable for everyone joining, and we look forward to seeing you next time. And have a great day.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Thank you. Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye.